I have a house, an old gray house, built in the sand of the Lake Erie beach. And although the outside is beaten weather, the inside is nice with like pillows, a lot of colors, but I can only remember red strewn about, and low tables and windows facing out on the lake that go from the floor to the ceiling. And Joey and Paul are there too, and the three of us sit around, stoned on some kind of drug that makes you sleepy. And I'm nodding out, and Joey splits for a while, and then the phone rings. It is an old black phone with a seaward window. Hello, I say, and I hear the other party hang up. But for some reason, I say hello again. Paul begins talking in his sleep, mumbling first and then out loud with laughter, while the gray, forbidding clouds begin to gather offshore. Paul, still laughing in his sleep, begins grabbing my outstretched leg and pulling it close to him the way some people do a pillow. I clasp my hand to his shoulder and rouse him. I'm still troubled by the call, and he looks up embarrassed, and I smile absently. Then the phone rings again. This time there's a pause, and then a muffled and distant voice begins speaking unintelligibly. Thinking about it now, it could have been in a foreign language. I can't say for sure whether the voice was that of a man or a woman, but I could sense that it was a desperate voice, and then it was either begging me for help or warning me of danger. Paul and I were on our feet now, and after I told him of the cause, we went outside of the beach where Joey was sitting with a woman who seemed much too old for him. There were many others scattered about on the sand, watching with anticipation a line of clouds that hung like a curtain about 200 yards out in the lake and stretched as far as you could see in either direction. Before too long, we saw several water spouts forming in the mist. 3 of them. And then suddenly one broke away from whatever had held it there and began swirling towards the shoreline and us. We watched its approach with something like glee and laughed hysterically as the visibly turbulent air smacked specter-like into the White House behind us, tearing off a section of the rain gutter from the edge of the roofing. I woke up laughing. I heard somebody coming downstairs and went to investigate. It was Joey. You just getting home, I asked? He nodded. It was 7 in the morning and neither of us was going into work. Joey put on some coffee. I just had the weirdest dream, I said. And I told him the dream.
Jehovah's Witnesses came. Their names were Danny and Madeline, and they came around noon on Saturday. He looked like a wreck, and he let him in. They were middle-aged and well-scrubbed, and they said that it was wrong to use the cross as a Christian symbol, when actually it dated back to the pagan gods of Babylon. Besides that, they said, Christ wasn't crucified on a cross anyway. He was crucified on a long stake or a pole. And besides that, even if he was crucified on a cross, wasn't it weird that the instrument of his murder should become a venerated object placed on the altars of churches everywhere? When they left, Danny wrote on a little piece of paper from a notebook, Danny and Madeline Leninsky, Jehovah's Witnesses, 943-1824. hot summer nights with the windows open. Carter could hear big jet planes coming in and going out over the house and the noise made by the fan. In his backyard that night, some pervert tried to rape the little girl who lived next door. She was assaulted successfully by two boys when she was 3 years old, the mother of the girl told Carter that night. Now this isn't good. Meanwhile, the girl shook and sobbed and held Carter around the waist as tight as she could. By the curb, two police cars parked and kids on bicycles gathered around. In the back seat of one of the cars, a bearded guy in his late 20s sat handcuffed to the partition between the seats. "I can't take much more of this, Carter. I really can't take much more of this," said the mother of the girl who had been assaulted when she was 3 years old. "David, go get my Valium from off the washing machine and get a glass of water, please." "You gonna give Shelly a Valium, Mom?" "Just go, David." The little girl tightened her grip. Carter stroked her hair. "Honest to God, I can't take much more of this, Carter," the mother said again. On TV, a grossly overweight woman sang Toyland while in a playpen behind her, a bald-headed man wearing a diaper wrestled with a pretty young girl dressed in what seemed to be a pornographer's conception of a white nurse's uniform. Soon, these two were joined by a dwarf dressed to look like a doctor. The fat woman sang, appearing unaware of what was taking place behind her. Some seconds later, the fat woman's voice became drowned out by the tracked laughter of an audience that didn't exist. The fan rattled in the window. Outside in the night, heat lightning flashed white like a slow, irregular strobe. My soul possessed by a love magnificent and the days of summer. But you can't look back. There's just no percentage in it. The city I once knew lays far behind. I can't go back. And you know I waited for her in that rainy train station. Man, I once had a big idea to be somebody so much better than you. I had ambition. And just look at me now. Another drink. Take some time to think about it. If you don't treat it right, it's sure to take flight. A human heart. Some people have them. On a winter's day, in an empty cafe, just me and the barmaid and the memory of you. My soul possessed by a love magnificent in the days of summer.
letter was twisted. Follow our instructions exactly, or your family will die. If you do not follow our orders, we will kill her, and we will not be quick to kill her. She will die a slow, painful, and horrible death. We will take many days to torture her, and we will finish by cutting her into many pieces, and you'll never even find enough to bury. So if you want your wife to live, do exactly as we say. Get all the money that'll fit in this bag. Get the $100 bills and the $50 bills and the $20 bills. Then fill this bag with $10 bills, if there's any room. Do not get any coins, or $1 bills, or $5 bills. Remember, if you are followed, or if you don't follow our instructions, your wife will start suffering and dying. I don't remember where I was when I got the call, but I was down at the scene where Sally Weiner was found shortly after she was found. They had just removed her body when I got there, and they were beginning the search of the whole area and so forth, and, well, so from then on I was involved, as far as that goes. In every case of electrocution, death inevitably supervenes, but it may be a long and, above all, excruciatingly painful death. The space of time before death supervenes varies according to the subject. Some have a greater physiological resistance than others. I do not believe that anyone killed by electrocution dies instantly, no matter how weak the subject may be. In certain cases, death will not have come about even though the point of contact of the electrode with the body shows distinct burns. Thus, in particular cases, the condemned person may be alive, even conscious for several minutes, without it being possible for a doctor to say whether the victim is dead or alive. This method of electrocution is a form of torture. You know, the thing that probably bothers me the most, the thing that makes me feel comfortable with the death penalty, is that David Kuppenheffer knew Sally Weiner. She was absolutely no threat to him. He knew her children, he knew her husband, he knew she was defenseless and she had no gun. I mean, to walk her out into a wooded area and then shoot her point blank in the back of the head. deserves the death penalty. And we've had a lot of murder cases since I've been here, and I can't say that every murder case deserves the death penalty. Legally they don't, and even just emotionally or morally they don't. But in his case, I had no qualms about it at all. Like 20 years ago, he bought a Colt Python for $200. It was worth $1,200 today. That same year, he was working for a detective agency in Cleveland. He was taking the door at a bar and checking IDs, and he met a cool little dancer named Patty Landry. She was hot. She wore mini skirts with matching color underwear. About a year later, he married her. I think she's up in Toledo now. He's on death row at Western Penitentiary.
If it wasn't so downright funny, the thought of going to bed with Helen Vosloo could make me vomit. I had to think about it though, because earlier that day she called Joey and told him that Ernie Gogol said that I said that she, Helen, was good in bed. Paul laughed. Now either Helen lied or misunderstood something Ernie said, or Ernie lied or misunderstood something you said, or you're lying and you really did say it. I wouldn't fuck her with a rubber dick, Joey said. And I had to laugh at that. But outside offered less relief than the inside did. The sun. Thin cotton curtains hung limply in open windows through which no breeze had blown even slightly in hours. Joey's scratchy couch, which doubled as a bed for him at night, felt chafing and uncomfortable, and the stagnant air seemed heavy and motionless and semen-like. My armpit smelled like a cunt. This would be the last hot day. There's yelling in the street below. Dago women, fat and bulging out of shorts and sleeveless bandolon shirts, and colored women with metal pins painfully holding and setting their hair. Yelling at children and dogs and cooking lasagna or chicken in oppressively hot kitchens, finished in peeling yellow linoleum and chrome and vinyl. Nothing is comfortable here ever, I think. It's always too hot or too cold, and the food's never really what you'd call good. And the chicks are always ugly and stupid, as are the situations you find yourself in with them. This place is called Collinwood, and it's a neighborhood of row houses on the east side. The people who live here stare at you and hate you from their front porches as you walk by, because you're walking and they're just sitting there. Outside, a radio played loudly for a moment. The governor claimed that his left eye was swollen and red for 3 days after being hit with the pie, and denied during cross-examination that the irritation was caused by his hair dye. Coming up next, a student kills his teacher, it said. We laughed. You should write that down, Paul said, and I did, in one of those long brown reporter's notebooks I used to keep. But it's too hot to talk. Sweat beads on temples and upper lips, and the eyes stare vacantly at nothing. The old lady who lives downstairs moves slowly about in her area, and you can hear her shuffling from one room to the other, getting milk for her cats and crabari for herself. She's drunk all the time, and that's why she rented a Joey after he moved out of my place. We left for the club before it was even dark. Now sound check went good, but that never meant anything. We hung around for a while after and then went to a diner for dinner. And then we just drove around. There's no place like show business. With sundown, things cooled off, and the streetlights hung like pearls on the basic black of night. It was still kinda early, but we headed back for the club. We were opening for the ridiculous social snobs, and there were sure to be a lot of people there. We just couldn't stay away. And across the crowded dance floor, behind the smoky glass of the control booth, I saw Helen Voslock, grotesque and animated, talking at someone whose face I couldn't see. The gin I'd ordered arrived, and I walked quickly back to the dressing room. Soon we would go on, and soon it would be over. And maybe it'll be good, I remember thinking. Trusting husbands, the creeps and sluts I understand. I'm here to serve you, to save your world. Your every wish is my command. And sometimes they feel my eyes on the back of their neck. A little voice crying, watch out dear. Terminal fear, I'm a nervous wreck. Excess has daunted my career. My job is to watch them destroy themselves. The pieces end up in my report. The sport is in seeing how they fall, and apart from that, I'm sad to say I've seen this all before. So, how are you and how do you do? It's like a taste of heaven to be with you. Here's a toast long overdue to the reckless, ragged, wrecked ingenue. Actions have equal reactions, and you can always count on a price to pay. I don't want to own you, I don't even want to rent you. All I want to do is have my own way. Who wants it? Who needs it? Your paradise is overpriced. A capital improvement wouldn't help my rise in discontent, and I can't afford the payments on this merchandise. Dame, and I was her shadow. Picked her up, coming out of the shoe store. Stayed behind as she stopped her window shop. I killed a half a pack while she stayed at the pawn shop. Stopped to reload as she entered the Empire State. Saw the indicator stop at 108. And if she dies cause I'm too late, well that's like my whole reputation shot to hell. That's too tough, it's just she played me for a set before. I won't be one anymore, so actions have equal reactions. You can always count on a price to pay. I don't want to own you, I don't even want to rent you. All I want to do is have my own way.
There's one thing I can tell you. When they told me my little brother was dead, I cried and cried until tears of blood streamed down my cheeks. And later, Kathy and Tommy attempted to explain the phenomenon by saying I must have broken some blood vessels in my eyes. I prefer a more biblical interpretation. 10 days after he was killed, we buried him in the small cemetery down the road from my parents' house in East Tennessee. Suki and Danny brought Joey's ashes from California, and Kathy, Tommy, and I swung through Cleveland and picked up Paul on the way down. Some legal problems in Minnesota prevented Ricky from leaving that state, but his wife Joni came. And Kathy and I picked up Suki and Danny at the Nashville airport, and there was some problem with the baggage, so while Suki and Kathy were getting it sorted out, I bundled Danny up and went to the bar for a drink. And sitting there with his 3-year-old son, I remembered a couple of months earlier when I had what would be my last drink with Joey. I'd lost my brother, but gained a nephew and a sister-in-law. It was like some kind of bizarre cosmic baseball trade with God. And there's questions you can ask. Why him and not me? Was it a heart attack or a reaction to the medication or something else? How could he be dead when I talked to him that very morning on the telephone? You can ask all you want, but you won't find anybody who can answer you. You know, the thing about Joey was he thought it was really possible to be happy, like and happy all the time. And he was always running and looking for that happiness. In New York and LA and Europe, and with women and drugs and money and booze. And his family and his wife and his child. And God. He thought you could do something, go to a place, swallow something, love somebody, or believe in something, and that in itself would make you happy. And he was killed early on the morning of Saturday, November 16th in a one-vehicle accident in the Hollywood Hills section of Los Angeles. He was driving west when, for no apparent reason, the newspaper said, his car crossed 3 lanes of traffic, struck a concrete planter, smashed 2 parked cars, and plowed into the side of a building. He was 33 years old, and I gave the eulogy at the funeral. I wrote it drunk the night before, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to get through it. But once I got up in front of the people, I was in control, and I got through it fine. Joey was a rock and roll drummer, and he lived like a rock and roll drummer, and he died like one, I said. Jimmy Climax called from New York when he heard all the wrong people are dying, he said. So in the end, he split to a place where I can't even call him on a telephone anymore. I think about him looking for his happiness, and I wonder if he found it. You know, death was always funny to me before. It was funny to all of us. I heard Joey say 1,000 times, live fast, die young, and leave a pretty corpse. And I'm not talking about the death of some beloved grandmother, which is somehow quite different, but the deaths of our friends, musicians, and former colleagues. Like Steve Baders having a cigarette on the sidewalk outside a shop in Paris while his beautiful wife browsed inside. A Peugeot sedan jumped the curb and knocked him down, but I'm alright, he said, getting back up and dusting himself off. He died that night in his sleep of a brain hemorrhage. Or Johnny Thunders No more than 6 hours after checking into the St. Peter guest house on Burgundy Street in the French Quarter in New Orleans, gone there say those who knew him better than me, to get straight. Dead on the floor of his room, his blood the dream of some rookie toxicologist. Pete Haskin, the sax player, withered away and dead of AIDS in a Harlem tenement, or Mike Antle, who, after nursing his mother to a horrible death by cancer, blew his brains out after being diagnosed with the same condition. Bradley Fields, dead of who knows what in some filthy Rikers Island cell, yeah. Live fast and die young. It was always, oi, dead boy, this one's for you. I'll see you when I get there, motherfucker. And now I'm not even sure there is a there. I only know that I feel more and more disconnected with this world, and that even those of us who are left alive are somehow less real. It's like you're not the same person today you were yesterday. And there ain't nothing you can do about it. I know the saddest place in the world, man. It's down in Tennessee. Suki called right before Christmas. She was going nuts. A couple of years earlier, she bought Joey a video cassette copy of It's a Wonderful Life. It was his favorite movie. She said he cried every time he watched it. Now it was on TV 3 times a day in LA, and she just couldn't get away from it. George and Harry Bailey, Mary, Bert and Ernie, Clarence, and the affirmation that life is good and worth living. The time will come in this generation when everybody knows somebody dead whose favorite movie was It's a Wonderful Life. And then nobody will be able to watch a fucking thing anymore. But Joey isn't any deader than I am. So I get to put up with this shit another year, another 5 years, so what? At my job, at work, 30 people a day tell me what they think is important. But I know now what is important. Nothing. Nothing is important.
just in between her teeth.
Back in hell. Work was hell and he came home and it was hell. He took the long way home and stopped off for gas. It made him sick. His stomach was in knots and he had pains in his chest. He thought that if he had to live like this, he didn't want to live. But this wasn't living. It wasn't anything. He wasn't even him. Not in hell. He was some pressure in the back of his head that only went away when he was alone, high, driving to and from work. When he was Nick, whose mother was Virginia and whose father was Dane. Thought back to a long time ago. Once he had gotten a hold of a prescription for 60 Thorazine, but he didn't have the money to get it filled. A girl he knew said she would do it. Take the script to the drugstore and pay for it in return for half the pills. But she burned him. He didn't see her again for months. He would have wondered whatever happened to that girl. Except that he married her 5 years ago, so he knew that she was upstairs in her bedroom. He hadn't thought about that Thorazine in a long time, but now it seemed like it just happened. and he smiled to himself. The washing machine in the kitchen made the apartment sound and vibrate like the engine room of a small steamer, and he felt her looking at him, looking from the stairway. But when he turned his head, she was not there. Now she came, standing near his chair for a moment, as if to take a cigarette from her pack on the table next to him. But he pretended to read, and she went into the kitchen where he watched her dark reflection on the screen of the turned-off TV as she fixed him a cup of coffee. He watched her like a show. "Thank you," he said, as she brought him the coffee. It was all predestined, or so it seemed to him, somehow inescapable. She went upstairs and after a while came back down. "This is really bizarre," he said, "because just last night I had a dream you were wearing that." And she wanted to make up too. "Let's not fight like this anymore, baby," she said in his ear. "I hate it when we fight."
It was warm, about 50 degrees. The snow had melted and it was cloudy and dark and gray and humid. There was an atmosphere. Some old friend of Bunny's showed up at the animal farm with morphine and Kirsten started shaking and Willie said, "Let's take a walk, baby." She had been there 3 days and hadn't had any dope in all that time. No heroin or morphine or Demerol or opium. It was the longest she'd gone in a while. She was trying to kick. There were little hard areas on the insides of her arms from hitting up, but otherwise she was soft and beautiful. She was 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 100 pounds. You read it on her driver's license. She wore a black motorcycle jacket, black jeans and boots. Had the whitest skin he ever saw. She'd been in a car crash the other night and had on dark glasses to cover her black eye and the stitches above her eyebrow. They walked around the block and up the hill to the little Baptist graveyard they had there, and Willie watched Kirsten dance this little spinning dance among the ancient tombstones. She bobbed up and down. The stones were white or dark gray and stood from a few inches to a few feet above the wet green grass. That night he got drunk and trashed his room. He was trying to help her kick heroin and he was nothing but a fucking drunk himself. It was pitiful. When he woke up in the morning, she was gone. He called her name, but she was gone. Later he found out that Debbie had called during the night and that Kirsten had answered the phone. Debbie had cried and called him a monster and the devil. Maybe he was a monster and the devil. Began to look more and more like that every day. He thought about Monty Clift and his new face, and the way he got in car crashes and died. Or was it about some guys? He tried to call Kirsten again and again, but there was no answer. Finally, she called him. She said she loved him. nightclub was dark and crowded with friends and would-be friends and enemies, and there wasn't a girl there as good-looking as Kirsten or a guy as good as Willie. Everybody wanted to talk to him. Either they wanted to get Willie into a band or they wanted to get Kirsten into bed or both. What a hoot. At one point, the singer of the band who was playing introduced Willie and handed him a mic, and Willie got up and sang a song and people danced. Most of the people they talked to handed them business cards or napkins with telephone numbers on them. When they got home, they emptied these from their pocket and made a pile of them in the big ashtray on the nightstand and lit them on fire. They laughed and turned out the light and didn't leave the house again for the rest of the weekend except to get cigarettes and liquor. That morning in Tripoli, Yasser Arafat was making his stand against the mutinous Syrian-backed forces opposing him. Mutineers had driven him from the camp he'd held on the outskirts of the city and were now pounding Tripoli itself with 30 shells a minute. Willie watched it on the tube. Grad rockets firing from the backs of trucks. Young Arabs in tattered fatigues firing AK-47s around corners or carrying wounded comrades on makeshift stretchers. Arafat said he could hold the city for 2 months. Poor bastard, Willie thought. I thought I had a bad year. Outside it looked just about the same in the afternoon as it did in the evening. The sky steel gray, and bitter cold, too cold to snow even. When Kirsten came that night, she brought a pint of CC. He didn't even like CC. She was a beautiful thing. There was an atmosphere. Some old friend of Bunny's showed up at the animal farm with morphine, and Kirsten started shaking, and Willie said, "Let's take a walk, baby." She told the craziest stories. She'd been there 3 days. A guy tried to set her on fire once, and a friend of hers got machine gunned in his car. Heroin or morphine or Demerol, junkie stories. And she was so beautiful and tiny and fragile and young. She was trying to forget everything else and be comfortable. Now she laid close to him on the bed. There were little hard areas on the insides of her arms from hitting her on the forehead. But otherwise, she was soft and beautiful. Oh, Willie, I get so scared 3 inches tall and weighed 100 pounds. Willie read it on her driver's license. Me too. She wore a black leather motorcycle jacket, black jeans, and boots. She's probably the most honest girl he ever saw. She told him right up front. She'd been in a car crash the other night and had on dark glasses to cover her black eye and the stitches above her eyebrow. He thought, but he doubted it. They walked around the block and up the hill to the little Baptist graveyard they had there. But Willie watched Kirsten dance this little spinning dance. Now the light was out, the TV was on, and some all-night news show was running footage of the space shuttle landing. The stones were white or dark gray and stood from a few inches to a few feet above the wet green grass. Sigh in her throat. Willie was resting on his elbow, smoking a cigarette and watching her. He was trying to help her kick heroin, and he was nothing but a fucking drunk himself. He touched her black hair with his hand. He kissed her on the cheek. When he woke up in the morning, she was gone. He called her name, but she was gone. At 7:30 that morning, they sat in the living room at the animal farm, cracking open a 12-pack they just brought home from the mini-mart. Kirsten made some eggs, sunny side up. Well, we could go sit on my bed and watch a Today Show, he said.
I don't think I'm ready for today, she laughed. They went and laid on his bed underneath the warm blanket, kissed and laid
Debbie had cried and called him a monster and a devil.
Up until 2 that afternoon.
Maybe he was a monster and a devil.
It was great.
It began to look more and more like that
every
every
day.
day.
They walked down to the liquor store and bought a fifth of Canadian Club, stopping again at the mini mart on the way home, where Willie got some big cans of ravioli and chili and some hot dogs with some food stamps he had. They got back and Kirsten called in sick to her job and Willie started cooking chili dogs in a big pot of ravioli. They drank the CC straight, chasing it from a big tumbler of water. It took about an hour to kill that fifth. Willie dished up 3 big
He thought
plates
about
of
Monty
food and
Clift
they sat
and his
down
new
with Bunny
face,
to a good supper.
and the way he got in car crashes and died. What was it about some
When
guys?
he woke up, she was gone. Her scent
He
lingered on
tried
his
to call
pillow.
Kirsten again and again, but there was no
Bunny
answer.
sat in the living room reading a comic
Finally,
book
she
and
called
as
him.
Willie walked in.
She said she loved him.
Where's Kirsten? She went out about a half hour, 45 minutes ago, Bunny said. Where'd she go? I don't know. Willie put on some coffee. She coming back? Tried to sound casual. She said she'd be back in an hour or so. He knew she'd gone to cop. He trudged up the stairs, pissed off at himself. He'd let her drink him under the table, and now she was down on 55th Street looking to score. He went in the bathroom, got undressed, turned on the hot water, and took a shower. Kirsten was gone. The yards and the sidewalks were white with snow, and the streets were black and
Lake
wet.
County cable television,
Snow
mom
kept
and
falling,
dad,
big soft flakes that looked like one of those glass balls kids get for Christmas that you shake up. Anna got to visit a sick friend, and Bunny was downtown, and Willie was alone in the house, drinking coffee from a big mug and trying to keep warm. He had a cat on his lap. The furnace had gone off sometime during the night, and it was just as cold out in the living room as it was out in the streets. He could see his breath. On TV, there was a rerun of Shelley Hack's second Charlie's Angels episode. Farrah Fawcett did a guest shot. She was under the spell of a charming con-man jewel thief, and the Angels got involved in the case. There was a commercial for Alka-Seltzer Plus cold medicine.
That morning in Tripoli,
came back, that's just
Yasser
how it
Arafat
was.
was making his stand against the mutinous Syrian-backed
He let her in
forces
and kissed
opposing
her on the
him.
mouth and neck and head.
The mutineers had driven
held
him
her
from a
close.
camp he'd held on the outskirts of the city,
I'm gonna be
and were now
sick, she
pounding
said,
Tripoli
covering her
itself
mouth
with
and
30
dashing
shells a
into the kitchen.
minute.
She
Willie
threw up
watched
in
it
a
on the
sink.
tube. Grad
baby,
rockets
he said,
firing from
putting
the
his
backs
hands
of
on her
trucks and
shoulders.
young Arabs in tattered
She was
fatigues,
shaking.
firing AK-47s
Her
around
eyes were
corners and
scared for a
carrying
second,
wounded
then she
comrades
smiled
on
and her eyes
makeshift
were dreamy.
stretchers. Arafat
She put
said
her
he
arms
could own the
around
city
him
for
and
2
held her
months.
there, and they rocked back and
Poor
forth.
bastard, Willie thought. And I thought I had a bad year.
I love you, he said. Poor you. You gonna be okay? She nodded her head.
When Kirsten
go get a
came
drink,
that night,
she
she
said.
brought a pint of CC. He didn't even like CC. She was a beautiful thing. He let her in and held her
He
close.
walked down the hill to the 20th
Her eye
century
was really
bar.
getting better.
It was beautiful
Her
out.
lips still hurt.
Kirsten ordered
sorry,
triple
baby, he
peppermint
said.
schnapps, and they downed 4 or 5
Don't worry, she
quickly and
smiled.
without thinking.
I'm getting $900 for this accident.
She paid up with a 50 and then
He
shoved
laughed
the
and they
change
kissed
into
again.
Willie's hand while she put on her jacket. Hold this, she said. He put the money in his pocket. When they got back to the animal farm, Bunny was there and Ann and Schliemann. Bunny was making some wicked remarks about Willie's misuse of the word juxtaposition.
And everybody was laughing, and Willie flipped out his knife and hurled it across the room where it stuck in the wooden floor inches away from Buddy's bare foot. They laughed even harder. The bathroom was freezing, and Willie sat shitting on the old porcelain toilet, watching his breath mist as he exhaled. Kirsten came into the room. When he was done, he wiped his ass, but didn't flush, for the flush was to lower the water pressure sufficiently as to make taking a shower impossible.
Give me my money, she said.
Instead, he lowered the seat cover and reached behind the shower curtain and turned on the hot water.
Don't do this to me.
Then went to the sink and looked at himself in the mirror and put some toothpaste on his toothbrush and brushed his psychotic drunken episodes. He got undressed in the cold and pulled back the shower curtain to get in and was horrified by a large pile of black cat shit beginning to run under the hot water.
Go get it, I want my money.
He gagged and turned off the water.
You heard me, Buster. I want my money now.
Damn cats.
He almost
With some
laughed
toilet
when she
paper,
called
he
him
began
Buster.
cleaning out the tub.
Go get it yourself, he said.
Picking up the lumps of black cat shit and dropping them
fuck
into the
you, she
toilet
said,
where they
and
mingled
left.
with his own shit.
Couple
And he
minutes
found it
later,
hard to
she was
control
back.
his breathing, so the gagging got worse.
can't
and worse.
find it. Now
And
give
as he
me my
dropped the
money.
last lump of smelly, sticky
Kirsten,
black
it's in
cat
my
shit
coat,
into the
it's in the
toilet,
living room.
he puked all over the bathroom floor.
Don't play games with me, Buster.
He couldn't help but laugh.
Fuck you. I'm not
hell
gonna do
or
anything
what?
for you until you stop
He
talking
asked,
to me like this.
each word misting in the frigid air in front of him.
I want my money, you fucker.
He turned the hot water on
taking
again
off
and
her
let
shoe
it run
and
till the
hurling it at
murky
him.
water at the bottom of
Missed
the
his
tub
head by
cleared.
inches.
And then he stepped in and pulled the shower
Then she was
curtain
on him and
closed
trying to
behind
hit him, and he was holding her back. Kirsten, baby, he was saying, what are you doing? Think about what you're doing. Do you really think I would take your money? Look, I'll go get it.
New Year's Eve
Wait
came,
here,
and
I
just
will get
before
it.
midnight, Willie and Kirsten walked down the hill expecting to go to the 20th century, but it was closed, so
He went and got
instead
the
they
money
went to
and
the
brought it
Master
back to
Plan
him.
bar, which was one block
She
up.
was crying on the floor when
Her
he
feet
came
made
back.
pointy little footprints in the snow
Picked her
alongside
up and
his.
almost dropped her. Put
He
her
had never
back.
seen a footprint so small or pointy.
She cried and
He
cried
knew
and
that he would
shook.
be able to recognize
He
it
said
all.
they was there.
They had been drinking since noon,
Sooner
and the
breathing
Master
became
Plan was
regular.
dark
She
and
was
crowded
asleep.
and rowdy. They were the only white people in there. They had drinks the
Thought the
bartender
beer
called
with her
Long
was like
Island
being in
iced tea,
another
which
country.
contained gin, vodka, rum, tequila, and
There was her and him,
Kahlua,
and then there was
and which was
everybody
served
else.
over ice in tall frosted glasses with a slice of lemon and a maraschino cherry.
On
They
TV,
were
there was a
delicious.
commercial for alcoholism treatment.
Kirsten played some Art
Some guy
Blakey
said-
on the jukebox and laughed.
I just got tired of waking
started
up every
dancing.
morning with bruises all over my body.
Willie sat with his back to the bar and watched
Fucking
her.
panty waist,
She was
Willie
beautiful.
smiled. Who needs you?
Smiling. She crossed over to where he sat and threw her arms around his neck. He laughed and they kissed and they drank from their drinks. Willie bumped into an old gold-toothed guy sitting next to him and said, "Excuse me," and the guy said, "Oh, that's all right. My name's Ben. Happy New Year's to you." And Willie introduced
She woke
himself
up and he was
Kirsten,
lying beside her on
asked
his
Ben if he
stomach,
had any New Year's resolutions.
propped up on his
and Ben
elbows,
said,
reading a
"Yeah,
book."
not to drink anymore."
She kissed him on the ear and the mouth, and he kissed her, and she
It was
threw
an
her
old
head
joke,
back
but
and
Willie
smiled,
cracked up,
and he
laughed,
leant
and
over and
slapped his
kissed her
hand
on
on
the
the bar.
front.
And Kirsten laughed, and Ben kept a straight
baby,
face
he
and they
said.
drank. The closer it
She
got
had
to
the prettiest
midnight, the
smile
more
I ever
crowded the
saw.
bar became.
So easy.
At New Year's, they hugged and kissed
Is
and
it day or
yelled
night,
night
she
around
asked.
on the house. And Willie went home happy as
He
hell.
smiled and kissed her again, and the book fell off the bed. He told her it was 9 in the morning. They laid in bed and watched a program called Woman to Woman on TV. There were about 20 women sitting around talking about how not to say things you don't mean and can't take back during arguments with your
She was
husband.
talking on the telephone in the kitchen.
Kirsten and Willie smoked joints and
From
laughed.
the living room, he heard her laugh.
Then a
Could
game
be
show
worse,
called
Gene.
Wheel
It
of
could
Fortune
always be
came on, and
worse,
then
she said.
Dream House, and then the stupidest
You
one
don't
of
hear
all,
sick
which is
shit
called
like
Go.
that.
People won and lost thousands in cars, cash, and prizes. Kirsten and Willie stayed in bed all day. He knew it was getting late when the evening version of Wheel of Fortune came on. It was the same as the daytime version, except that the host and hostess, Pat Sajak and Vanna White, wore evening clothes. "I think I'm ODing on TV," he said. "Stop shaking, Han," she commanded. He
cracked up laughing. Finally, she got up and took a shower, and then he did, and then they walked together down to the mini-mart for a 12-pack. He had read somewhere, or somebody had told him, that Schlitz had the highest alcoholic content of any domestic beer, and so they got Schlitz. It was bitter cold outside, and his ears burned in the icy wind. They walked back up the hill, hand in hand, smiling. They might even have been happy. He just knew it made him happy to see her. The windows of the house was out, and the TV was on, and some all-night news show was running footage of the space shuttle landing at Edwards Air Force Base. Dads were coming home from
Kirsten
work.
was asleep and
Sitting
made a little
down to
sigh in
dinner
her
with their
throat.
families. Willie was resting on his elbow, smoking a cigarette and watching her. She was beautiful.